All right, we're live. We got Dr. Colt Olson on today with the Colorado Rockies, mental skills coordinator. Welcome, excited to have you on. This has been a long time coming, and I'm pumped to get it going.
Yeah, for sure, man. No, I appreciate you having me. It has been a long time coming, and we've done like a ton of other stuff. So I'm glad we
Yeah,
finally worked this one out.
totally. Yeah, no, I'm pumped, and I think this is gonna be jam packed with a ton of valuable insight. And just for everyone listening, for the past, I don't know, what's it been, a year now that we've been in contact and
Yeah.
really working together for like the past 3 months with Monkey Mind and a bunch of other things. I've learned so much, and I'm excited to have you share your insight, your knowledge, your perspective to the world. And I think it's gonna be, like I said, jam packed with a lot of valuable information. So pumped to get it rolling.
Absolutely, man. Me too. I think it's going to be good. I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Well, if you want to introduce yourself as far as athletic background and then your education background and, how you segued into being with the Rockies for the past 6.5 years.
Yeah, for sure. So as Danny said, my name's Colt Olson. Most people just call me Colt, Dr. Colt, something like that. I grew up mostly in the Colorado area. Went to a small high school where I was fortunate enough to play a ton of sports. I had a graduating class of 47, so we had a limited number of athletes. So it was like in the fall, I played golf and football. In the winter, basketball. Spring was baseball, and occasionally track if they needed a guy to come out and run a race. I usually had to run the races that nobody else wanted to run, which kind of sucked, but it was fun to go see the friends. So played a bunch of different sports, had an awesome time. Started to get interested in psychology when I was in high school. There was one psychology class offered, and I don't know if you could only take it as a senior, but typically it was only a senior level class. So I kind of had to wait a couple years and anticipated that, and because I was always interested in the brain and thinking stuff like that, but I hadn't had that much knowledge about it. So I was always excited to take this class. And eventually, as a senior, was able to take the class, loved it. It really solidified for me that psychology was where I wanted to go. So I went into my freshman year of college. I went to play baseball at Montana State University Billings, a Division II school. Um, yeah, I went to play baseball and school wise right away declared my major. I knew I was going to go into psychology. I wasn't totally sure where within psychology I was going to end up. I was kind of leaving that open. I wasn't sure if like, hey, is it going to be counseling? Is it going to be sports? Is it going to be neuroscience? Like I had a few different interests that I kind of needed to hash out. So started that journey. Was there for 2 years. Baseball didn't really work out the way I wanted to there. And I kind of developed physically in a weird way. Like I was a late bloomer. So I got like a lot bigger and faster and stronger throughout my 2 years there. And at the end of those 2 years, I was like, hey, baseball's not working. Maybe I should go give football a shot. Like I was a pretty good high school football player. And I had a buddy playing football at Colorado Mesa University, which is in Grand Junction, Colorado, another D2 school. And I reached out. I was like, hey, you think, I could come and jump on the squad? Like, who's like, what do you think? He's like, yeah, for sure. Come on down. So left Montana State Billings, went to Colorado Mesa, played a year of football, and then ended up after a year of football, decided that college football was not for me. I did not love it enough to be out there every day. And we had like the way it was set up at our school was we had our football practice field was like connected to the baseball practice field. So like the outfield essentially just extended into our field. And I remember being out there in the fall at football practice, just like hating it and watching everybody play baseball. And I was like, oh, I screwed up so bad. Like I want to be playing baseball so bad. So shifted back, ended up playing baseball for my last 2 years at Mesa. Loved it. Continued with psychology. He ended up being my academic advisor, but one of our professors had a background in sports psychology. So I was able to pick his brain a lot. Really kind of fell in love with sports psych. At that point, I was kind of a mix of like I loved sports psychology and I loved neuroscience, but didn't really have the academic prowess to get into a neuroscience program. Those were pretty intense. So finished my last 3 years at Mesa with a psych degree, minored in Spanish, then went and did a master's in sport and performance psychology at the University of Idaho. When I was there, or actually right when I finished, is where I got in contact with the Rockies. The guy who's my boss now ran into my academic advisor and was asking him about students he had, things that were going on, because he had just started with the Rockies as a mental skills coordinator, and he was the only guy doing any work. So he was like, hey, I need a little help. I'm overwhelmed. Like he asked my advisor if there was anybody that could be sent down just to help him on like an internship type basis. And he gave him my name because, school had gone well. I had a baseball background. So I got connected with him, started doing a little tiny bit of work with the Rockies. Wasn't sure if it was going to materialize into a full-time gig. So I ended up going to do a PhD in educational psychology at the University of Northern Colorado. Throughout my time there, my work with the Rockies just kind of increased. And I kept seeing these parallels. Like I loved ed psych and I loved sports psych, and there was a ton of crossover between the two. Ed psych for me was just like sports psychology for the classroom. So the schooling paired well with the work. And like I said, my work in baseball just kind of continued to grow over those years. And then in 2022, I went on full time with the Rockies, and that's where I've been since. Yeah, as a mental skills coordinator. So in that job too, for people that don't know, is my job is to oversee the mental performance development for all of our minor leagues. So we have like 150 some minor league players. My job is to spend time with them, educate them, work with them real time, teach them what mental performance is, how to implement it into their game, and then kind of work with them as they climb the ladder and get up to the big leagues. So, yeah, that's me.
Sweet. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure, I think it's important that, with your background in sports and, your journey throughout it. And I think it's important to have that kind of perspective that when you're talking to these athletes, they know that you've been there. And how do you feel that being an athlete or a former athlete yourself, and having all those years of playing sports and going through the ups, downs and battling through that, how do you think that kind of helps with your perspective on, coaching these athletes that are trying to make it really?
Oh, it's massive. And so for me too, like my college baseball career, athletics career really did not go like I wanted to. I didn't have a very good career by any stretch of the imagination. So it's helpful for me, having struggled, I can level with them really easily and be like, hey, whatever you're feeling out there, I can promise you I felt it. Like I know what it's like to be out there and feel like you have no idea what's going on. You can't think, you can't make decisions. And as a result, you can't perform. So I'm able to level with them there really quick. And just the basic experience of having played a similar game to what they play now. It's like, I didn't play in the 90s. Like I played a few years ago. Like there are a lot of guys I work with that could have been on the same team as me. So we've had a similar experience in terms of baseball, and it just helps build trust, right? A lot of this job is trust based. Like they need to buy into me and trust me and know that I have their best interest in mind. I'm aware of what they're going through and I'm on their team. And having that experience as an athlete is massive for that
Mm-hmm.
because they feel like I'm a part of their fraternity, right? I've been where they are, so it's huge. It's huge, and it helps me when I teach in a classroom or have a one-on-one session with a guy. Like I can frame things in a way that I know are going to make sense to him from a baseball perspective instead of just giving him the academic perspective, which also matters too. So it's been massive for me. It's a huge deal.
Yeah. What are kind of some of the things that you're seeing? How much correlation, I guess, is there from when you were playing to the athletes now? And I'm sure you've worked with, obviously far younger athletes, and how much of it is different? How much of it is the same? Are the principles and tools that you're teaching and kind of helping them navigate through, or the issues that you're helping them navigate through, are they kind of the same? Are they a little bit different? I feel like from my experience, they're similar. They present themselves differently as you get higher up in the levels, but I'm curious your opinion because, um, you know, obviously as a youth athlete, your goal is to play at the highest level, and kind of having that perspective on what those athletes go through versus, the youth ones and the younger guys. What does that look like to you? What's your perspective on it?
Yeah, so I'll answer this in a couple different ways. Like, first of all, the game compared to what I played, baseball specifically, is quite a bit different in terms of resources and the way players learn about themselves. Like, so my last year playing baseball was 2016. So between 2016 and now, the advancements in technology in baseball are massive and just the widespread use of it. Like the data these guys look at, the way they analyze themselves, the way they evaluate themselves, and the tools they use to get better are different. So, like, we had no tech when I played college baseball. Like, there was nothing like we didn't have TrackMan, we don't have Hawkeye, we don't have Rapsodo, we don't have anything, any of those metrics that would show us anything about, our spin rate, our vertical break, horizontal break, nothing that would teach us about our biomechanics that would help us tighten things up. Like we had our buddies and a pitching coach who were like, hey, looks like your front side's flying open. Maybe keep it closed. And that was the extent of it. So the tools they have in terms of growth and evaluation are much different now and much more sophisticated. Luckily, I've kind of been in the game and seen it come up. So I'm well versed enough that I can have conversations about it. But that aspect's different. But the challenges they face are more or less the same. I think, like you said, they can present themselves differently because their experience is a little bit different than mine, but generally they all deal with the same stuff. And honestly, having spent, like I said, most of my work is with the minor league guys, but I have spent some time in the major leagues as well. And I can tell you that a lot of the issues young athletes face are not that much different than the ones the guys at the highest level deal with. The stage is bigger up there, the lights are brighter, so it feels a little bit more intense. But generally, like, it's baseball. You still have to
Mm.
play baseball. You still go through slumps. You still have a hard time throwing strikes. You still have to make a play after making an error. Like, there are a lot of similarities as you go up. So one of the things that we try to do as guys go up in pro baseball is make sure they have a huge amount, like a super strong foundation, a ton of tools they can lean on and use as they climb the ladder. Like, we want guys to have a bunch of tools and then be adaptable at whatever level they're at, so they can navigate a new challenge they face. Like, it might be a similar scenario, but it's presented in a different way because it's a higher level. So we want to make sure they have a super strong foundation, a lot of tools, a lot of things they can lean on, and then they are adaptable enough to implement those tools as they climb up. Because it's a lot of the same stuff, just repackaged, repurposed, and it feels like you have to be able to get through it faster because you're at a higher level. So does
Yep.
that answer your question?
No, it totally does. And it kind of leads me into the next one, which is specifically, if you don't mind sharing, you've got Danny Perez, who just got out of playing college baseball. He signed with the Rockies and he's in the minor leagues, right?
Yeah.
Let's take me, for example. How are you structuring, say, a program if you're working with a specific athlete that's fresh out of college, starting in the minors, looking to work their way up, and then preparing themselves for when they're ready to play in the MLB and in the big leagues?
So super individualized, right? Like, the first thing we do when we get a guy is, so we meet him right away. All of our players. So the MLB draft is in July. Like 2 days after the draft, everybody comes down to Arizona and they meet us. So we'll get into a meeting right away. I'd learn everything I could about you, your personal life, your baseball experiences, a lot of your beliefs, things like that. I can get an idea of where you're at. And then within that, I'll get a gauge for where you are in terms of your experience with mental performance. So some guy, it's really, even from huge programs, like, it's kind of a mix and match. Like, some guys will come in and have a really good foundation, a lot of experience in our world. A lot of guys come in and have never even heard about it. So we got to get a gauge for where you're at. And then based on that level, your experience level, we can work things in personally. But really what we try to do right away is, even if you have some experience, we teach you the foundations. We say, like, hey, these are the 8 to 10 super foundational concepts of mental performance. We're going to teach you these every single day. We're going to help you implement them real time. And then as you build on these foundations, we'll handle things that come up within that. Because a critical thing is that you have the foundational tools. Like, we don't need to dive into something super complex day one when you don't even understand how your mind and your body work together. Like, you
Yeah.
have performance anxiety and you don't understand the connection between your brain and your body. So we're not going to go super complex, super deep until I teach you, here's the basic connection. Here's how you need to understand this and use it on the field. So get a gauge for who you are, establish the super foundational concepts, and then we just work together. Like, again, I said trust is a big thing. I need to make sure that I'm working to develop a relationship with you early that's genuine, to let you know that I care about you. And then we can work together and navigate the challenges that are unique to you as you climb up. But it always starts with trust and then the foundation. And then we can teach adaptability through that.
Mm. Two things. When you're meeting with the players, when they come into to camp in Arizona, are those you're doing individual meetings first, you're saying, and then you
Yep.
go into kind of like general stuff with the group, but you're doing an individual kind of like intake, so to speak, to get
Yep.
a gauge on where they're at. Okay, cool. And then
And the way it
this,
works with us too is we get them, like I said, in July, and then we'll have them back as a big group, like from mid-September into early October for like a 3 week block. And that's where we do some more in-depth, like, we teach all the foundations, because we'll have them at a camp at that time of year. It's called Instructional League, where we bring back, it's all the new guys plus some other young guys. And the mental skills team, we get them in the classroom every morning for like 15 minutes. So it's like, day one, hey, here's self awareness. Here's day two, how you control the controllables. Here, day three, here's how your mind and your body are connected. So we give them those in the classroom and we give them a bunch of resources to take with them. And then they build on that moving forward.
okay, cool. Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm assuming that those are part of like those 8 to 10 foundations, like
Yes.
controlling the controllables, and that's what I wanted to ask you was what are those 8 to 10 or foundations that because I've been studying this, not studying, but like I read a lot of books in this, and I've had a lot of conversations, and
Yeah.
but I still feel like I don't even know what that is, and I'm in it, I'm in this world full time, and I'm doing this, so I feel like I'm still learning a ton. I'd like to pick your brain on what those 8 to 10 are.
So you could ask a bunch, you could ask 100 different people, you probably get 100 different answers.
Okay,
I think everybody thinks different things are foundational, but I can tell you for me personally, foundational skills, like there are certain things that guys have to have. Like we have to make sure guys understand who they are, what they're good at, what they're bad at, what their tendencies are, and where they need to grow. So we teach them self-awareness. That's one of the first things. Like if you are not a self-aware person, a self-aware baseball player, you can't grow. Like if your perception of reality and actual reality are entirely different, you can't go anywhere because you think you're this guy when you're this guy. If you can't close this gap, there's no growth for you to have.
so it's like
So
your identity as a player, correct?
kind of more so like, but this is even like, so think more basic than identity. Not even that, like just think a basic self-evaluation. So
Would that
like,
be like
hey,
I think I'm this type of player, or I don't know, like I think I'm gonna hit home runs every time I get up to bat, and you're like, hey, you're a spray hitter, or you're
yeah,
like kind of something like that, just like knowing what you're good at and what you're not, and then
absolutely. Yes. I think I'm a mentally tough baseball player. It's like, well, dude, I watched you struggle to take your shoe off and you freaked out. You're probably not as mentally tough as you think you are. Like those types of things. Or like you
yeah,
can't handle
okay,
being tired at the field, like super
got it,
basic stuff. So
got it.
then we go into, so it's self-awareness. We teach them to control the controllables. Because again, I believe maybe the number one way people are tripping themselves up in everyday life, sports or not, is they're trying to control stuff they can't control. And especially in baseball, baseball's such a hard game. Like 90% of it is out of your control. Like whether you're a hitter in the box or a pitcher on the mound, if you're a pitcher, as soon as the ball leaves your hand, you have no control over what happens. And same as a hitter, as soon as the ball leaves your bat, you have no say what happens. You don't get to choose outcomes. You can do everything right and still fail. And you're going to do everything right a lot of the time and still fail. So we have to teach them that. We have to teach them how to deal with those things. Then we teach them their self-talk. Like the way you talk to yourself, your internal dialogue is going to determine your reality. It's going to determine how you perceive things, how you interact with things, what you believe, and eventually how you act. So we have to help them understand, like, if you want to perform in an elite fashion, you first have to think in an elite fashion. So we hit them with self-talk, and then we teach them about the connection between their brain and their body, the mind-body connection, how you respond to pressure events or important things in your area. Your body's gonna have a certain response and your brain's gonna have a certain response, but they work in lockstep. So we teach them, like, here's how you navigate feeling nervous. Here's why you feel nervous, and here's how you navigate it. Here's why you feel afraid in certain places, and here's how you navigate that. So we'll teach them to understand that from a thinking perspective and a physiological perspective. Then we'll teach them. So how many foundations is that? Is that four?
I think so, yeah.
I think it's four. And then we'll go into stuff like we teach them to be resilient. We teach them what optimism looks like and what it means to be a realistic optimist. Confidence. We teach guys. Then we'll go into things like higher level stuff like imagery or visualization.
Okay,
One of the most important things, another foundation, maybe this will be the last one, body language. That's another thing we hit guys early with because most people fail to recognize the importance of that. Like the way you carry yourself largely determines the way you're going to think and perform as well. Your confidence levels. Like there's a really good TED talk on this. I can't remember what it's called. The lady who gives it, her name is Dr. Amy Cuddy, and she talks about how they did a study where they brought people in and they would have them like chew on a cotton swab and they would test their hormone levels, primarily testosterone and cortisol, right? So testosterone, like we call it, that's like the ass kicker hormone, right? Like that's going to get you prepared to perform, be at a high level,
mm-hmm.
help you make better decisions, get your energy up, all that. Cortisol is a stress hormone. And that's going to be like the powerless hormone. Like your decision making is going to get worse. Your thinking is going to be a little bit clouded. You're not going to have those like confident chemicals flowing in your body, all that. So they looked at those primarily. And then they took them for 2 minutes and had them either sit in like what they called a powerless position, which would be like here. Like I would sit with my shoulders kind of slumped over, like bent over in my chair just for 2 minutes, right? And then they had the other group sit in power poses where they would either stand with their shoulders back, they'd have their hands up in the air like this, or they just sit in a confident position. And then after the 2 minutes, they took a measure of those hormones again. And they found that the people who were in the powerless positions had like a 20% increase in cortisol and like I think a 10% decrease in testosterone. And the powerful positions was the opposite. Testosterone was up like 15%, cortisol was down 10%. So we teach guys to take advantage of this, and it's kind of like a hack, right? But being aware of your body language and controlling this so you're creating the right physiological response for competition and then letting that drive your thinking and creating kind of a success cycle for yourself. So again, I don't know
Interesting.
how many foundations that was, but I think it was close to
I don't
10.
know.
That's most of what
I
we give them.
Yeah, I was just looking at myself in the Zoom, trying to see where my shoulders were. If I've got poor
Right.
posture, and
Got
I
to be
think I got to
powerful.
correct myself a little bit. Um, so then you said that you have athletes that you work with when they come in the summer, and some have a background in understanding this, and some never heard of it at all.
Yeah.
Um, of the ones that have had a background in this or understand what it is, how many of them are that skilled in this? And because it kind of segues into more of like my question of these things can be taught at a younger age, right? So you're having a
Yeah.
lot of athletes who are elite athletes, sign with the Rockies organization, and half know, half don't. And those that do, maybe they're skilled, maybe they're not that skilled. And yeah, I'm just curious as to how many of those really do have an understanding and a good grip on these foundations, and how that can be taught to athletes at an earlier and younger age, so that way they're more prepared for those next steps.
Yeah, most of them aren't that skilled. Like even the ones that do have a background in it, they're probably familiar with the concepts, familiar with the ideas, but haven't put a lot of it into practice. And one of the primary reasons for that in pro baseball is if you get drafted to play professional baseball, you have probably not had a very hard time in the game. You have probably not struggled very much. You probably haven't failed very much. So you haven't necessarily had much of a reason to use these things. So they're familiar with it, they get it, but they don't know what it's like for them to have to use it or to overcome something using these skills. Like a handful of them do. There are some guys that deal with some tough seasons, a tough stretch, and they're familiar with this. They have a process that they use, skills that they lean on heavy, and they're great with that. But most of them don't. So I think for young athletes coming up, like exposure to it is massive. I think that's something that you're super passionate about. I'm super passionate about. It's good to get the information out there. But for a young athlete, especially a good one, it's really important that you teach like, hey, this is what this looks like every single day in terms of how it comes to life within your physical practice. It's not a separate thing. It's not something you do in a dark room by yourself. Like it has to come to life every single day. And I would encourage coaches, if they see this, the best way you can force people, I guess, you can't really ever force people, but almost force them to use it is put them in situations in practice that are competitive and a little bit pressure packed, or at least have consequences. Because, like I said, a lot of good young athletes are never challenged coming up. They never fail. They never struggle. If they do, it's for a really short amount of time. They don't have to change anything and they can keep going through it. So, the most important piece is that as a young athlete, that mental performance, these mental skills are not just an idea. They're not just something that sound nice and look good on a piece of paper and you say, I like that. I believe in that. I believe in a growth mindset. That's critical. You have to use it. You have to put it to work. And again, I think that comes down to as a young athlete, it's hard to structure your own training. So it largely comes down to coaches putting you in scenarios where you need to use it. But if you have the opportunity, push yourself, make yourself uncomfortable, take on new challenges, and think about what it looks like for you. Like some of those foundational concepts, like what does a growth mindset look like in my world? What does resilience look like in my world? What does self awareness look like for me? Take yourself through those thought exercises and do your best to put them to work. That'd be my encouragement. Don't just let them remain an idea for you.
I know the one thing that comes to mind for me with that, with what you're saying, is um, these things don't ever go away either. At least for me personally, and we've had this conversation before, they can present themselves after your sport. You know what I mean? And
Oh
we've
yeah,
had conversations about how I'm noticing that, you know, what was presenting itself in hockey and what I was having a hard time then. is now presenting itself in day-to-day life or business, whatever that case is. So I think it's important that we keep harping on this stuff because it's tools that you're learning through sport that are going to help you in your life and whatever you decide to do after.
100%. And it's funny, I've had a couple guys ask me the question. They're like we'll have a mental skills chat and they'll be like, so what does it look like when you have this figured out? Like if you're a mental skills master, what does it look like? And I'm like, you never have it figured out. Like nobody's so dialed in that they're living their life error free and their thinking is always perfect. Like that's impossible. Humans are imperfect, right? But for me, what it looks like is recognition and adaptability happen fast. Like if you're a mental skills master, you can very quickly recognize when you are going in a direction you don't want to go or you're thinking in a way that doesn't serve you in that moment. You can stop it and adjust and re-engage the situation effectively really quickly. And again, like you said, that's a skill that works in sport and it's a skill that works in professional life because challenges are going to be thrown at you forever into eternity. You cannot avoid them. You're always going to deal with stuff that's going to trip you up. It's just a matter of do you have the skills to recognize that you've been tripped up, get back on your feet, and re engage effectively. That's what it's all about. And the sooner you start practicing these, the easier it's going to be for you as you get older, enter higher levels, or get into the professional world. So it's
Mm-hmm.
super important that you learn these now and start practicing as early as you can.
Yeah. One thing that's come to light, which I'm obviously sure that you've seen and just being in this world, is the separating factor, and that is mental performance and sports psychology, which I'm a firm believer in, and I believe you are too. And so, um, one thing is athletes that that separating factor, right? Everyone's skilled, everyone's got kind of the tools, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this being that separating factor, you take a rookie or a player in the minor leagues, guy fresh out of college, versus the elite in the MLB. Like, what is that? What does that look like from just like look at it from a player? If you don't know, like skill set wise, mentally wise, is it just the mindset? Kind of what are those two players? Um, I guess what's the elite player have that the guy fresh out of college maybe not or lacking in or is working on developing to become that?
Yeah, so really good question. And I think at least, in baseball, and I think in most pro sports, like just about everybody does have the tools. Like more often than not, a guy is absolutely skilled enough to play at the highest level. Like it's not, I would say it's not the norm that somebody ends up, at least in baseball, out of the sport because they just couldn't hack it physically. It happens, right? The game gets hard, but most guys are super talented, a lot of physical gifts. So the mental piece is absolutely the separator. And I think the best example I can give of this is a study they did in tennis. So they went to, elite tennis players, professional tennis players, and I don't know if they were sports psychologists or whatever they were, but some psychologists wanted to see, like, okay, what's the difference between a top 25 player in the world and a top 5 player in the world? So that would be like elite versus super elite. And so they tested everything, right? They looked at all the physical metrics, everything, serve speed, way they move across the court, how they return stuff, whatever. And they found that all of those, there was some difference, right? Like elite players, super elite players might be a little bit more talented, but they're marginal. It's not enough that we can say, like, hey, elite tennis players, their serves are just 20 times more accurate than regular tennis players. Like a top 5 serve is 20 times more accurate than a top 25 serve. Nothing like that. The most significant difference was the separator between top 25 and top 5 was what they did in between points. So in tennis, I think that's like 30 seconds. I'm not super well versed in tennis, but I think it's like 30 seconds. And they found that the way they handled those 30 seconds accounted for the difference in their ranking. Meaning the people that are top 5 understand exactly how they want to think, what they want to think about, and where they need to be in those 30 seconds. And people that are top 25 are just floating. They don't know. They're going to be emotional. They're going to think about what just happened. They're going to think about what's going on in the crowd, what might happen this next point. Their mind is all over the place. Those in between moments are the difference. And you are an athlete, being able to navigate those in between moments effectively are what allow you to recognize errors faster, adapt faster, re-engage more effectively, and stay in the present moment and just focus on what you're doing. I see guys in the minor leagues that have a really hard time doing this. They can't effectively navigate if let's say they're hitting and they feel like they're in a good spot and then the umpire makes 2 bad calls in a row and they're down 2 strikes and they think it's unfair. They're frustrated. an average player, an average minor league player will not know how to navigate the 15 seconds he has before the third pitch. So he's probably going to end up having a bad at bat or striking out, right? An elite player knows exactly how he needs to handle the 15 seconds before the third pitch, re-engages, and he might still get out, but he's at least going to fight through that at bat and have success somewhere. Same thing, they don't know how to handle it in between innings or in between games. They don't know how to turn the page on a day. So I think the difference is those in between moments and how they handle those and understanding how you need to think, how you need to respond, how you need to move on from play to play, game to game, whatever. That's the biggest difference for me.
And that's responding versus reacting. And one which
100%.
I learned from you, um, which is huge. But one thing is just taking a response is taking a pause
Yeah,
like a breath and being able to have like that 1 to 2 seconds to have a thought behind how you're going to react versus the react or respond versus the reaction is just emotionally just how you're kind of programmed, I guess, to automatically react, right?
absolutely. And I think, something we've talked about and you've seen me teach is like being a gatekeeper of your thoughts.
Yep.
Like in those moments, that's what it's all about. Like, hey, when I'm being tested, when I'm struggling, when I'm having a hard time, can I stop for a moment and check whether or not every thought I have is serving me right now? Or is it just a thought? Because we know neuroscience research shows us that humans, we have between 12,000 and 60,000 thoughts a day. 80% of those thoughts are negative, 95% are repetitive. So we're wired for negativity. And that's because negativity keeps us alive. It prevents us from doing stupid stuff. But that means you need to be aware of that and be checking your thoughts consistently because negative thoughts are not conducive to high performance. So you need to be able to go, okay, can I pause for 1 second? Something just happened that I don't like. I'm getting emotional. Let's stop, take a breath, recognize if these thoughts are trying to serve me. If they're not, I'm going to let them go. If they are, I'm going to let them through and I'm going to roll with them. Right. And so the first step of that is recognizing, but the second is being able to go, okay, if all of my thoughts are not serving me, can I switch that up and reframe them in the moment to make sure they do? Right? Like, hey, I'm in a bad situation. The guy had 2 bad calls. I'm down 0-2. That's not where I want to be, but I'm a pretty productive 2 strike hitter and I'm going to battle right here. Instead of just going, yep, great, here we go again, right? Guy screwed me over. I'm going to suck today.
Mm-hmm.
Like, all it takes is 1 second to make that decision and go, okay, you know what? I'm not going to go in the dark dungeon here. I'm going to stay productive, battle, and get something out of this. So being a gatekeeper of those thoughts and having that pause that's elite level stuff, high level stuff.
Mm-hmm. And it's hard to do
Yeah.
because when you've been doing something a certain way for so long, you just want to be like, oh, screw that. Like, I'm just going to, but it's hard to make that decision to stop, not react the way you naturally want to react and to fight that urge. And again, I'm not speaking for everybody. I'm speaking for myself as I'm
Yeah.
learning this stuff, but I don't know. It's a little shocking how difficult it can be at times and you just want to like, react how you normally typically have.
Well, I think you're speaking for most people, probably. I think that's
Okay.
human nature, right? It's just how it goes. And like I talked about earlier, one of the foundations is self-awareness. Like, are you even aware that you have destructive thinking patterns in big moments? Most people aren't because they're never told that. Like, you're never taught how to think. You're just sent to school and they teach you all these great skills, like you learn how to do math or whatever, right? You learn about the presidents, like things like that.
Yeah.
No one ever teaches you like, hey, have you decided to check on whether your thinking is productive today or not? Like no one knows that. People are just rolling with their thoughts, right? Before you're taught this, before you have this information, thoughts are just rolling in there. And
Mm-hmm.
as a human, you have a negativity bias. So your default setting is to have negative thoughts, emotional responses, all of that. So you're never taught that. And I think the second piece of that is in a weird way, it feels good to be a victim and be frustrated and be angry at times because you can have a little pity party. Be like, oh, look how unfair this sport is. This game sucks. I always get screwed over. This guy never gets screwed over. Like you throw yourself a little pity party, and we like that for some reason. So we have to navigate that as well and battle that temptation to have a little pity party and just feel sorry for yourself.
Well, I think it's easier to do that than it is to stop and look internally and be like, one thing that I've heard too that I think is huge is be so good that you can't be denied.
Mm,
And if you're good enough, they're gonna find you, right? Like I think having that mentality gets you away from finding the easy way out to say that, oh, I got screwed or I got this. It's like you have to find a way to just be so good and make yourself so good that you're undeniable. And if you're not, then that's an easy way to just be like, look, okay, I'm not that good at them, or whatever the case is. But that's one thing that I think is huge because it's so easy to just go and say, oh, I'm a victim of this circumstance versus how can I make this circumstance work in my favor? How can I use it to challenge me? Or how can I become better from this and learn from it?
For sure, right? And it is hard to do that because it requires you to take ownership first and say, okay, I'm not as good as I should be for these reasons, and that's my fault. Most of the time it is your fault. It's not some random nefarious force that's preventing you from being the best version of you. It's like you're just not doing the things you need to do. And then on top of that, you have to assume responsibility for your growth, which is also really hard to do because again, it falls on you. Like, hey, if I'm going to take these steps and decide that I'm going to be the best version of myself and be so good they cannot ignore me, that's all me. If I don't make it, that's on me. And you have to be willing to look in the mirror and go, you know what? That's okay. I'm good with that. I'm going to take that risk. I'm going to go all in myself. I'm going to take ownership and responsibility and move forward the right way. It's huge. And the second piece of what you're saying when I hear you talk about that stuff is what confidence really is. And it's not like you sitting at home having good self-talk or reading your affirmations or doing what you need to do, right? It's you going out there and deciding you are going to become competent at what you do. I'm going to get the reps. I'm going to have some proof, meaning I'm going to put it to work in scenarios where it counts. And I'm going to kind of stack those wins and stack those chips and let my confidence be a result of me taking ownership, responsibility, and working my butt off to be so good they can't ignore me. It's
Mm-hmm.
and it sounds great, but like you said, it's really hard to do. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of reflection, a lot of responsibility, and a lot of work. But if you can get there, man, it's a powerful place to be. Very powerful.
100%. And I was going to add in there too that this is obviously coming from somebody who was not good at this, but it's easier for me to say it now in hindsight.
Yeah.
And now that I'm done playing and I'm, the bullet stopped firing, it's easy for me. I'm in a good headspace to talk about this, have this perspective, but trust me, I know it's not easy and it's something that I was not the greatest at, but hopefully I think I'm moving in the right direction. So
I think so. The fact that you can say that means you're probably going the right direction. But you're right. It's brutal when you're in the game. Nobody wants to say that stuff, but it's how you grow. It sucks, but it's how
totally.
you grow.
Yeah. I've got one more thing I want to ask you slash topic I want to cover before we, close this out. But if there is a piece of advice or some things that you could tell to a youth athlete that is getting curious about this stuff or doesn't know about this stuff, or just like some little like tidbit that you could give them to say, like, hey, this is something that you can do on your own day to day or before practices, before games, or before you do your sport to help you become that player that you want to be. What would that be, or what would that look like?
So I'll give you some. This is an easy one that I think anybody can implement. Maybe not any age, like maybe I don't know, starting at like 13 or 14, you can probably start doing this. But I think for a youth athlete, something that you can do every day is so you can just do like an 8 to 10 minute mental workout, right? And the way you do this is so this mental workout attacks like some of the foundational things, right? Managing your emotions, visualizing success, mastering your self talk, those types of things. So, what you can do is, and I would recommend you do this to start your day or do it before practice if you want to, make sure you're in the right state before practice, any of that. So, here's what you do for the mental workout, right? Hold on, let me see if I have this on paper right here. I think I do. Oh, yeah, I do. Okay, good. So the first step in the mental workout is you need to establish your state. You need to get in the right emotional state, which will help you translate to a correct mental state. And all you do to do that, sit down. I would recommend you sit down in a place where you have a little space. It's going to be quiet. You could do it in a locker or something like that as well. But close your eyes and you're just going to take 3 to 4 solid tactical breaths. And so when I say tactical breaths, all that is a nice deep breath in through your nose. And when you breathe in, you kind of expand your stomach out and then you hold it in for 2 seconds and then you exhale for 6. So 4 seconds in, expand your stomach, hold it for 2 seconds, out for 6. So it's a total of 12 seconds. Do 3 to 4 of those. That takes you somewhere between like 40 and 50 seconds ish, something like that. So that's the first minute of your mental workout. Take those breaths. And as you take those breaths, have the intention of like, hey, I'm getting in a place to perform. Like I'm getting myself in the right state. I'm not super amped up. I'm not asleep, but I'm calm and I'm ready to get myself in the right place here. The second part of this workout, you dominate your controllables. One of the biggest things athletes miss on is controlling the controllables, right? So get a journal, get something where you can write down and write down 3 to 5 things you know you can control throughout your day. And then just a brief little like sentence or word about how you're going to do it. So like as an athlete, like I think one of the few things I always tell you they control, you can always control your attitude. You can always control your energy level or your effort, right? And you can always control your intentions or your plan. And some of the other things we talked about today, you can control your self-talk. You can control your internal conversation. You can control how you handle challenges. So list out a few controllables, right? I'm going to control my attitude, my energy level, my plan today, my intentions, and here's how I'm going to do that. My attitude, that means I'm going to smile in the face of challenges. That's easy, right? My energy level, even if I don't perform the way I want, I'm going to stay at an energy level 8 or above. I'm never going to let my energy or effort waver, right? My plan, I'm going to establish my plan ahead of time and stick to it. Those things. So you dominate those controllables. That'll take you another 2 to 3 minutes, right? The third step, see the future you want. So this is just a brief little visualization. And this one requires you to do a little bit of homework. And I think all athletes should do this. Sit down and write out your personal top 10, right? So the top 10 moments of your athletic career, whatever they are, write them out. And then for this part of the workout, you'll pick like 2 to 3 of them and just relive those moments. See yourself being successful. Feel those awesome feelings, that excitement, you being fired up, doing something great, picking your teammates up, whatever. Get in that moment, relive those top 3, and then take an extra 30 seconds to a minute and visualize yourself being great in the scenario you're about to enter. So whether it's practice, a game, school, work, whatever, see yourself being great there, dominating the controllables and performing at a high level. The thing you're going to do after that is you're going to dive into a little bit of self-talk, right? You're going to decide, and this is kind of like affirmations. I know I just took a little hit on affirmations with confidence, but it's really important for you to talk yourself into becoming the person you want to be. So in mental performance, the golden rule of mental performance is thoughts become beliefs and beliefs become actions. If you want to perform at a high level, you have to talk to yourself in an elite fashion first. So remind yourself who you're becoming, the work you're putting in, and even if it's something simple like, hey, I'm confident, I'm convicted in what I do, I trust the process, and I'm someone that plays for others every day. That's it. Incorporate some of that productive self-talk. Then the last piece of your workout is another 3 to 4 deep tactical breaths where you're reminding yourself like, all right, I finished my workout. I'm in a confident state. When I take this last breath, I'm done and I'm going to go perform with these skills. All those things together take 8.5 minutes. So that's a good little entry level thing. And really not even entry level for anybody. It's simple, but if you do it every day, it'll add up big. So that's a good
Yeah,
one people can lean into.
that's awesome. That's huge. Yeah, no, thank you so much. I want to appreciate you for coming on, or I want to thank you for your time coming on, and I appreciate you, having these conversations, and yeah, putting out your knowledge to the world. And I hope that parents, coaches, athletes that are listening can find this of value. I know that I always take something from it. So again, I really do thank you for the opportunity to come on here and talk to you and learn and yeah, hear your knowledge. So I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you having me, man. It's always fun, always a blast, and I love doing this. So happy to have an opportunity to shout out to the world.
Yeah, we'll do it again here hopefully soon and keep it rolling. But thank you.
No doubt, brother. Anytime.